Good morning, ladies of the Archetypes Unlocked program, and welcome to the second class, which is the one where we're going to be looking at the Cinderella archetype. So when you come on to this live, please do say hello, let me know you're here, let me know if you're catching it live, if you come on now, or let me know by hashtag replay if you come on later. And do bring a journal again, because I'm going to be giving you a pretty powerful tool to be working with today in this masterclass. The 4 quadrants of the manifestation sequence is one of the big chunks of teaching that I want to share with you. So do bring a notebook and bring a cup of tea, make it a nice experience for yourself to settle in. And if you have friends who you think would enjoy being part of this group and who would like to know more about the archetypes, then you are extremely welcome to invite them into the group by sharing the link. Or if you're not sure how to do it, then just drop me a message and I will happily share the link with you. That would be amazing. I feel like the more women that can receive this gold, then the better. And if you haven't already joined the Goddess Ascension group, which is my main Facebook group, then please just go ahead and do that at some point today, because that just means that I will always be able to connect with you if I want to let you know what's happening, or I use that group as a place to remind people about things that I've got going on in other groups. So it's a great idea to be there as well. So most of you, I think, have managed to watch the Oliver Twist one, but maybe some of you have not yet, which is absolutely fine. So if you have watched it and you haven't yet shared, then please feel free to let me know in the comments from the Oliver Twist masterclass, or do a post. I love that some of you have started to do posts in the group to share what's coming up for you. That's amazing. It really, really helps for my channel to open as well. So please do continue to share, and check out Alex's video about the Oliver Twist characters, where she talks about the Fagin character, Oliver, and the Mr. Bumble character, because Alex actually did like an embodiment practice. She went into the garden and actually physically embodied each of those 3 characters from Oliver and practiced getting into their body to try and unlock a little bit more of what those characters are actually really trying to communicate to us. So Alex's video is really interesting. Morning, Lindsay, and morning, Lindy. Thank you so much for joining me live. It's super helpful to me to have people with me. So maybe you can just start actually in the comments by just posting, like, what, when you think of Cinderella, like, what is the first thing that springs to mind about Cinderella? What is your first association with Cinderella? That would be a really good place to start. And then what I'm going to do to really begin this masterclass is to start to help us to get some links between these 2 archetypes of the Oliver Twist and the Cinderella archetype, because there are some key things that they have in common. And again, if you want to play along with me, then feel free to type in the comments, like, what do you notice off the bat that the 2 archetypes of Oliver Twist and Cinderella might have in common? A happy ending. I'm so happy you've said that, Lindy. I'm so happy you've said that, because I think a lot of the time when we think of Cinderella, we think of her in the basement sweeping, right? And when we think of Oliver, we think of him proffering the bowl and begging for more. So I love the fact that your first association is that they both have a happy ending, because one of the fundamental things that both of those stories have in common. Oh, Lindsay, I say that I'm like Cinderella all the time. Is that because of your compulsive cleaning habits? Or is there more to it? And if so, elaborate. So something that both of the characters have in common is that they go through what we call a hero's journey. And if you look at the work of the writer Joseph Campbell, he talks a lot about the codes and the energetics that are in the hero's journey, right? You can map that onto almost any story. You can map it onto Cinderella, you can map it onto Oliver Twist, you can map it onto the Julia Roberts character from Pretty Woman, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. They're all on a hero's journey. What is the definition of a hero's journey? There is a sense of, usually the protagonist of these stories is a child, right? Or a young person. So Cinderella is supposed to be 16 in the story. So she's almost still a child, right? And Oliver Twist is 10. So often these stories present us with a child character, a child protagonist. Why? Because the child is the obvious symbol of the path of development, right? The path of evolution. The child is moving into maturity, and the child must face initiations along the way, as every single one of us has done in our own hero's journey, right? So one of the things that Cinderella and Oliver Twist have in common is that they are both orphans. Now, lots of stories, lots of fairy tales have children who are presented as orphans, right? That has two mechanisms embedded in it. One is that the reader, or the viewer, if you're watching it as a film, immediately feels compassion for the child, right? As soon as we feel compassion for the child, we are engaged with their experience, and we are engaged with all of the challenges that they're going to face along the way until they find their way metaphorically home, right? And on a cosmic level, that's what all of us are doing in this life, right? We are facing challenges, perpendiculums, initiations, growth spurts, healings. We are constantly on this journey, this hero's journey, back to our rightful home, quote unquote. You can use home as a metaphor for heaven on earth. You can use home as a metaphor for coming home to ourself and the truth of who we really are, coming home to our gifts, coming home to our rightful expression on this planet, coming home to understanding what our soul purpose is, and having the courage to step out of the metaphorical basement and share and be seen, right? So the orphan immediately creates connection with the audience because we are emotionally invested in their journey. Secondly, the symbolism of the orphan is that they are without the guidance of the mother and the father, meaning that to a large extent during their hero's journey, they must learn to initiate themselves. They must learn self-leadership, right? And they have to learn it in a much more radical way than other children, for example, who are not orphaned. So it's a symbol for having to master the self-parenting, the self-leadership, which again is a very important part of the journey that we're all on to come home to the fullness of our expression. So many times what happens in childhood, and we can map it onto Oliver and Cinderella, and we can map it onto our own experiences, right? Is that in childhood there are core wounds that take place. So to become an orphan is a wound. To be treated as a servant, as Cinderella is a wound. If I use my own childhood to give you a couple of examples, to feel extremely disempowered because of a very overbearing, oppressive parent, then the hero's journey for me is to find my own power, to reclaim my own power, right? If your freedom was very impinged upon in childhood, then part of your hero's journey might be to reclaim your freedom in whatever way that means to you. So if Oliver Twist's core wound was being orphaned and therefore not belonging, and many of us have that wound, you don't have to be an orphan to carry the I don't belong wound. I mean, a lot of us carry that to one extent or another. So Oliver's hero's journey is finding his way from not belonging all the way back to, at the end of the novel, at the end of the film, being adopted by a benevolent middle-class bookshop owner who wants to care for the child and finding his way back into some sense of belonging, right? For Cinderella, she is the archetype of the exile, and she is the archetype of the servant, okay? So her hero's journey is how to find her way out of the metaphorical basement where she has been hidden away, and how to heal the servant wound. So at the beginning of the story, Cinderella is actually born to very loving parents, right? Her mother and her father were described at the beginning of the story. The mother was described as very gentle, very loving, very pure of heart. The father was described as successful, a merchant, a kind gentleman, right? Oliver Twist was also born to a high class parent. His father was, an aristocrat. So both Cinderella and Oliver Twist by birth were actually noble, but by circumstances found themselves down and out. And then their hero's journey is to find their way back to their greatness, to find their way back to their rightful status, right? So all of us are on that journey. We all came with soul gifts, and we all came with core wounds to transcend. Now, before we came to the Earth School, we chose to learn certain lessons for our spiritual growth, okay? And because we chose to learn certain lessons for our spiritual growth, we also chose to experience contrast material in childhood. So, for example, if one of my soul purposes for incarnating here was to fully claim my sovereignty, then you bet your ass that the universe was going to give me some really strong material to work with in childhood to squash my sense of sovereignty. Why? Because the Earth School works in contrasting frequencies. So we have to experience that which we do not desire quite strongly sometimes in order to emancipate ourselves from that thing and find our rightful way back to the soul lesson that we came to master. In the case that the example I'm giving you for myself is sovereignty. And then usually along your path, at certain points along the path, there will be something that happens that looks like a crisis, which is actually an opportunity. So the Chinese symbol for crisis is actually the same symbol for opportunity, because they believe that encoded in every crisis is an opportunity, right? So if you take the whole COVID thing as an example, a couple of years ago, that was a collective crisis, right? But think how many of us from that crisis were propelled into some kind of up level, okay? So if you were doing a job in a hairdressing salon, for example, full time, but you knew deep down in your heart that there was something deeper, something more profound that you were supposed to be doing with your life, and then suddenly the salon was closed, you couldn't cut people's hair anymore, what did that create? That created a space in the quantum field, a pause button, for you to be able to dig deeper and look at, okay, what is it that I am supposed to really be doing? Or to come back to the sovereignty theme, for me, the whole COVID thing, which had all these different rules and regulations about what we could and couldn't do anymore, re-triggered the childhood wound of feeling utterly controlled, and then led me to come online and speak my truth and find my own pathway back to my sovereignty, right? So on the hero's journey, thank you, Lindy. I am glancing at the comments, but I'm channeling, so it's really difficult for me to channel and read at the same time. So I will definitely get back to them later. But on the hero's journey, these things that happen in your life, a relationship breaking down, a business going bankrupt, a collective crisis, such as a pandemic, for example, that on the surface looks like a disaster, many, many times is guiding us back to the deeper truth of why we came here and what our soul mission is. Okay. So part of Oliver's hero's journey was to, by finding himself in so many different environments that were not satisfactory, i.e. the workhouse was clearly not a satisfactory environment for him, the Fagin den of iniquity where he was being trained to be a thief, he was partly in awe of it because there was an element of almost magic about how skillful those other boys were at pickpocketing. So momentarily, Oliver's quite captivated by the mesmerizing magic of all these trinkets and things appearing in Fagin's box of treasures. But at a deeper soul level, he's disturbed by the stealing, right? He knows that that's not sitting right in his soul. So he finds himself in another unsatisfactory environment. He finds himself temporarily on the streets in London, which is also unsatisfactory. So he has to find himself in so many unsatisfactory environments that represent some type of home before he finally does all the initiations that his soul has contracted to do in order to find his way back to his true home, which is what we're all ultimately here to do, right? So Cinderella's two core wounds, and we can all relate to these in some way when we start to unpick them, I'm sure, are exile, so not being seen, being hidden in the metaphorical basement of life. So one of the aspects for the inner inquiry for you to look at in this module is, what aspects of yourself are you hiding? What aspects of yourself have you been told were not okay? Because often the aspects of ourselves that we were told were not okay in childhood, even if it was not told to us in any kind of intentionally negative way, we took it as gospel that those aspects of ourselves were not appropriate or appealing to other people, and we learnt to hide them in the basement. But if you begin to excavate what you have put down there in your basement, you will start to find that the things that you've put down there are often the things that hold the most energetic value and currency. So for example, when you were a child or a teenager, let's say that you were told that you had too much fire, you were too feisty, you were too volatile, you were always kicking off at people about things, and you were told that you had to fix that, otherwise people wouldn't like you or people wouldn't accept you. Ultimately, probably you would have learned to hide your fire. The issue with that is that your fire is clearly one of your core elements. So to condemn the child for having too much fire is to also deprive the child of understanding the full magnitude of their own magic. Because perhaps the child that has the most fire in their belly is the one that's going to grow up to be an activist, is the one that's going to grow up to be a human rights lawyer, is the one that's going to grow up to be a social justice warrior. You know, when we learn to channel those gifts, then we fully come into our purpose and our mission. If too flirty, exactly, that's a really good one, Lindsay, because whatever you were told was not okay, that is your most potent currency. If you don't get anything else from this class today, although I can assure you, you will, see if you can get that, because that is vital. Flirtiness is life force energy. Flirtiness is connection. Flirtiness is enjoying the zestiness of life and sharing it with other people. Flirting enhances people's vibration. Flirting sends feel-good hormones through people's bodies. Like, there are so many amazing... Flirting is a currency that we can use so that people literally can't do enough for us, you know? It's a powerful currency. Whenever and wherever we hold powerful currencies, there will be people who are afraid, intimidated, jealous, or afraid of their own sexual energy, for example. And whatever we are afraid of in ourselves, we often condemn it in other people. But to the child or to the teenager or to the young person, we don't yet have the sophisticated awareness to understand the level of projection going on. So we just think, I'm wrong and I need to modify my behavior so that other people will receive me better. But whatever it is that you've put in that basement, I can tell you that is your strongest currency. And one of the biggest aspects of your soul work will be to reclaim the flirt in you, or to reclaim the, for example, I was often told I was too sensitive. I was told you've got to stop being so sensitive. Otherwise, my mum would say, I will not let you watch these types of films anymore if you're going to keep crying. Gorillas in the Mist. It broke my heart, that film, you know. And I was afraid to show my emotions because I knew if I did, I wouldn't be allowed to watch it. Or I wouldn't be able to watch anything else for that matter. So I tried to hide my sensitivity. Now, age 43, I know that my sensitivity is one of my strongest superpowers. It's my sensitivity that tells me 24 hours before my Auntie Pat messages me to tell me that she's been diagnosed with liver cancer. I get the message from Great Spirit that she needs me. It's my sensitivity that means that I understand the depth of every single human emotion so profoundly that I can become a transformational facilitator. It's my sensitivity which means that I can intuit things. I don't even need to use my mind to make decisions anymore because everything comes to me from spirit when I stay aligned in my sensitivity. I wouldn't be an artist if I wasn't sensitive. I wouldn't be a writer if I wasn't sensitive. I wouldn't be an exquisite dancer if I wasn't sensitive. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That whatever it is that you've exiled about yourself has the most potent energy to it. And I want to encourage you to get your torch out when you do your homework later and start to really look at what you've buried, why you've buried it, who told you it was wrong. Without condemning those people, take a look at what their motives might have been for telling you it was wrong. Probably my mum couldn't understand or couldn't bear to access her own sensitivity because there was too much pain there. So often what we see reflected in our children, when our children express things that we've condemned to the basement, we will be triggered by seeing our children express those things, right? So if you have children, let me know in the comments, but sometimes their sensitivity can trigger you. Sometimes their level of truth-telling can trigger you, because you've trained yourself out of that level of authenticity. And the hero's journey is to find our way back to that authenticity, but in the adult way, in the more refined way. But nevertheless, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to come back to the truth of who we are. So Cinderella is condemned to the basement, and she is condemned to a life of domestic service for her stepsisters and the stepmother. Very often in children's fairy tales, we see the characters that do harm to the good character as being somehow corrupt, or in the case of stepmothers and stepsisters, there is something of the unnatural, right? It's not the natural family bonds, and therefore the behaviour towards the child is unnatural in the absence of love and affection. Okay. So we see that Cinderella is condemned to this life of drudgery down there. But we also see that she has many qualities which will later propel her onto the higher timeline. So both Oliver Twist and Cinderella both find themselves at the beginning of the story on what we would call the lower timeline. And we find both of them using the energetics of the 4 quadrants of the quantum manifestation sequence that I'm going to share with you today to elevate themselves out of the misrepresentation of those archetypes. Okay? So the archetype of the servant, we see Cinderella at the beginning of the story in the shadow aspect of that archetype, right? Who is she serving? She's serving her stepmother and her stepsisters. Are they worthy of all of the love and kindness and meals that she prepares for them and cleaning that she does for them and preparing their dresses for the ball for them to go and shine? Are they worthy of the way that she's serving them? No, because they express zero gratitude and they only have contempt for her, right? So when we are in service to people, projects, ideas, or organizations which do not see and appreciate our value, then we are in the shadow aspect of service. Does it make sense? So if you think about your own workplace or your own relationships, think about maybe areas where you haven't necessarily felt that the way you have been serving has been seen or valued. Okay, so when we continue to serve people, things, projects, ideas, entities which do not see our value, then this is the shadow aspect of being in service. Sometimes we keep trying to help people and they cannot receive the help, or they don't want it, or they're not ready for it, and they rebuff it. And then we have to learn how to call our power back and stop misusing it in a direction where it's not being received, right? But the light aspect of service, if the shadow aspect is being in service to things which are not in alignment for us, or things which do not see and honor our core values, our core value, if that's the shadow aspect, then the light aspect of service is when we are in service to the divine, right? When we are in service to something greater than ourselves. And when we are in service with the energetics of for me, for you, for us. So for those of you that follow Melanie and Leia, you will know that is one of her key mantras is for me, for you, for us. So at the beginning of the Cinderella story, we see her in service to them, to the sisters, but there is no positive energy exchange there, right? She's not receiving back from them anything of value. So there's no for me in it for Cinderella when she's under the oppression of those 2 ugly sisters. It's only for them. And there's no greater for us in the sense that her sweeping up after them continually and being their skivvy does not have any wider purpose to serve humanity, right? So it's out of alignment. And that's how you measure whether the things that you're giving your energy and your service to are in alignment. If they are, it will be encoded with for me, for you, for us. By the end of the story, when Cinderella has married the prince and ultimately becomes queen, she is then in service to herself, to the elevation of herself onto her higher timeline, to her beloved, and to the queendom. And we see that she uses her power for many positive things. When she becomes married to the prince at the end, and she becomes a monarch, one of the first things she does is she changes the legislation abolishing menageries so that animals cannot be kept in cages for the entertainment of the aristocrats, right? She also changes legislation around how the merchant classes are treated, because her father was a merchant, and as with many societies where you've got the elite at the top of the pyramid, you've got the middle classes or the merchant class in the middle, and you've got the working class people at the bottom, quote unquote. Often the middle classes are at the mercy of the, elite, giving them fair taxing systems, for example. So she uses her power and she uses her influence for the greater good, for me, for you, for us. And the prince recognizes those qualities in her when he first meets her, and that is why he is so magnetically attracted to her. And that is why, despite the best efforts of the ugly sisters, the prince doesn't look twice at them, because there is no greater currency other than the finery that they are dressed in, which is something of an illusion anyway, right? So how does Cinderella elevate herself from the predictable timeline to the field of potentiality? So Melanie talks about the field of predictability, the field of probability, and the field of potentiality as the three quantum fields that we can play in, okay? So the field of predictability is whatever in your life is predictable for you based on the current timeline. So for example, based on your relationship with your partner, there will be very predictable patterns in the relationship. He says this, you react like that. You go to the same place on holiday every year. You have very similar conversations. You understand the energetics of what you're bringing to the relationship. He brings money, reliability, childcare, whatever, back to the relationship. There is a certain energy exchange that you are both aware of, right? That is the field of predictability. Highly unlikely that your partner is going to shock the shit out of you by saying something uncharacteristically tender, if that is not the way that they normally speak. Highly unpredictable that your partner is suddenly going to quantum leap into a much higher income bracket overnight. Chances are your partner's going to be bringing in a regular amount of money, have predictable ways of relating, etc. It's predictable that you would probably go to the same shops to buy your food. It's predictable that you go to work on certain days. It's predictable that if at the moment you earn 20,000 a year, it's predictable that next year you'll probably earn something similar, right? So that's just to give you a few examples of what's predictable. So based on Cinderella's timeline at the beginning of the story, it is predictable, based on the fact that she's condemned to this domestic servant role within the household, it's predictable that she's going to stay on that timeline, right? It's highly unpredictable that she's going to somehow miraculously get an invitation to a ball, somehow manage to get there even though she's got no clothes because her sisters robbed them, somehow amongst all the beautiful young women of the elite class gets spotted, then has to disappear without a trace. There's no tangible way for the prince to actually get in touch with her, but somehow he does. And then suddenly she ends up becoming the queen. You know, this is like a highly unpredictable quantum leap, right? From the field of predictability to the field of potentiality. So when we are on a soul journey here, which has momentum to it, there are certain energetics at play that can help us to propel into higher timelines. And Cinderella embodies the 4 quadrants that I'm going to explain to you, that you can then apply to your own life and your own circumstances. So one of the mantras that Melanie uses a lot is 1 foot in gratitude, 1 foot in desire, right? Most of you who follow Melanie will be very familiar with that one. But as I've gone deeper into my own investigations around that particular mantra, I've realized that there are actually 4 parts, not 2. And that if we only focus on the gratitude and the desire part, we're missing some of the vital other parts of that particular energetic formula, okay? So let me try and ground that into practical terms. So 1 foot in gratitude, 1 foot in desire, at a simple level basically means the manifestation sequence works when we express appreciation and desire, we express appreciation and gratitude for all of the gifts that we already have in our life. And we also allow ourselves to desire more, or to desire new experiences, or to expand, or to up level, right? As we see in the Oliver Twist story, the manifestation sequence gets interrupted because the children in the workhouse are massively encouraged to express gratitude for the very, very, very little that they're given. But you bet your ass, as soon as one of them, aka Oliver, dares to desire more, that they come down on him like an absolute ton of bricks. What does that do is it interrupts the manifestation sequence. Because if we have been shamed out of desiring things, we get stuck maybe appreciating things, but without the desire, there's no upward momentum, right? But society has very much conditioned us to be grateful for what we've got and to not desire. So, how do we work with this to overcome this? To really connect with desire, there's a lot of energy work to do, actually. Because first of all, to connect with desire, you have to also be willing to connect with the sadness that might be the other side of the things that you desire that you don't have. This is why there's always an energetic flip side to everything. Can you hold potentially the sadness of the things that you haven't manifested, but not get stuck in it so that you allow yourself to levitate towards what you do desire? And you have to transcend the shame programming that yourself and the people around you have been encoded with, that it's wrong to ask for more. It's wrong to want to have more holidays. It's wrong to want to have a higher income. It's wrong to want to work part-time so that you can have more time with your family or more time to just pursue other interests. Like, there are so many ways that we've been conditioned to just accept less and be grateful. So 2 feet in gratitude doesn't create any upward momentum. That's why there's got to be 1 foot in gratitude and 1 foot always leveraging into desire. Now, to practice gratitude, and Lindsay, you're brilliant at this, absolutely the master of practicing gratitude. To practice gratitude successfully, you might think that sounds quite easy, right? All you've got to do, just be grateful that, you've got a nice life, got a safe house, got enough money to pay the gas and the electric, should be grateful for that. But the human nature is such that we fall down into the lack valleys all the time, right? We're constantly thinking, if only my partner was a bit more XYZ. If only I just had a little bit more money. If only I didn't have to work 5 days and I could just work 4 because it's too much. Like, we often focus on what we don't like about a situation rather than what we do desire. So how to not get stuck in the lack valleys, which then really brings our vibration down, which means that we're no longer a match for the manifestation sequence to work, is we have to actively practice the gratitude. We have to actively scan for the things that we appreciate, whether that's by journaling, whether that's by voicing them, whether that's by just walking down the street and summoning into your mind what you appreciate. This is a practice which is harder than you think, because those lack valleys are everywhere. It's a bit like snakes and ladders, it takes a while to climb up the ladder and then you fall down that snake, at the speed of light, and then you've got to climb back up again. So the energetic work to master the gratitude part is to really, really watch those lack valleys that are everywhere and keep levitating yourself out of them. To master the desire part, you have to let go of the shame that you've been programmed with, that has wrongly encoded you with the belief that it's wrong to desire. Desire is part of the energetic makeup of what we came to the earth with. We desired to taste, to touch, to smell, to see different landscapes, to conquer, to understand, to gain codes and keys, to love, to learn, to grow. Like, we're full of desires. We're full of desires. And it's important as we heal this to understand that there has been a conscious attempt to sabotage the manifestation sequence so that the vast majority of the population stays in a relatively disempowered, lowly state. Okay? So we've got the gratitude part, we've got the desire part. We've got the worthiness part, which is key. And I'm going to map this onto Cinderella for you in a minute. The worthiness part is, do you honestly believe that you are worthy of a better relationship? Do you honestly believe that you are ready to double your income? Do you honestly believe that the house that you've been dreaming of, that you are a match for it and you're ready to receive it? Like, do you believe those things? Do you believe that you are worthy? Because if we don't believe we're worthy, the manifestation sequence cannot work. It gets blocked, right? Lindsay, listening to this is making me aware of parts of my life I hold gratitude and parts I hold lack. Absolutely, we all do. But when we put the spotlight on them, that's when we can bring them into the light. So for me, you know, as far as the self-worth thing, massive, massive journey for me to own my voice. Like, am I worthy of people's attention? Am I worthy of people's time investment? Am I worthy of receiving the right amount of money for the work that I'm putting out into the world? Am I worthy to be listened to by women who are wealthier than me, who are relatively more, let's say, successful, quote unquote? Am I worthy? And it's a constant evolution to move to that yes. It's a constant evolution to move to the yes. You will sometimes take 2 steps forward and a couple of steps back. You know, it's a cha-cha. Self-worth is a massive issue for me. I hear you, Lindy, yeah. Wherever the self-worth piece is blocking you, the manifestation sequence will also be blocked. So just notice that. The 4th quadrant of the manifestation sequence is, can you handle the flip side of the thing that you most desire? Because everything has a flip side. For example, if you desire to be a coach online and to do Facebook Lives, Lindsay, self-worth, self-belief is still something I work on daily. Absolutely. If you are a coach, Lindsay and I are both coaches, and you desire to be seen, and you desire to have an audience, and you desire to get your message out into the world, what could be the flip side of that? You can type in the comments. What could be the flip side of elevating yourself to a position of being seen? Can you handle being seen by more people? Because there's energetic work to do there. Can you handle being scrutinized? Can you handle being judged? Yes, Lindsay, exactly. Can you handle the rejection? Can you handle projections from other people? So if I come onto Facebook and I start doing a class where I talk about money and desiring money, for sure there will be people who will be triggered by that. They won't like it. If money still is encoded for them with lots and lots of triggering things, can I hold the energy of myself talking about it from a place of desire and gratitude, fully knowing that that could trigger other people? Triggering people, messing up, embarrassment, 100%, Lindsay. These are brilliant, brilliant suggestions for all the things that we have to be able to hold if we're willing to show up on camera and be seen. Or if we're willing to show up in life in general and be seen. Can we hold those things? When we begin to move towards a place where we can hold that flip side, The universe, which has been holding you in an energetic blanket of protection, goes, Lindsay Powell is ready. Laura Pickerel is ready. And then that cloak gets dropped. That cloak of protection gets dropped. Or it gets at least loosened, because we don't need it anymore, because we can hold our power. So there's the desire, there's the gratitude, there's the self-worth, and there's can you handle the flip side. When you have got all 4 of those quadrants down, the thing that you are calling in is coming. 100% it's coming. But if even one of those 4 quadrants is off, there's resistance in your field. And you will have to continue to do the energy work to bridge the gap between yourself and the thing that you desire. Because the only thing that stands between any of us ultimately and the things that we desire is something of the internal resistance encoded in one of those 4 quadrants. Does this make sense? So let's bring it back to Cinderella. What we see of Cinderella is that even when she's in what we would call a lack valley, meaning her current timeline, her current life is on the surface miserable as shit, right? She's lost her mother, who she adored and who adored her. The father is always away on business, leaving her alone with a very bullying and abusive stepmother. The sisters are vile to her all day long, and she spends all of her day in domestic service to people who treat her like shite, right? So her current reality is what you might call the personification of a lack valley. And yet, do we see her acting as if she is in a lack valley? No. How do we see Cinderella behaving while she is in that situation? First of all, she befriends the animals, okay? She has the 3 blind mice, she has her pet monkey, she has all the birds. She speaks to the animals speak to her. The animals represent guides in the spirit world, okay? So often when we see characters in books and films where their physical reality, their human reality is very challenging, the energetic flip of the negative association of that reality is that the spirit world comes in to support them more, right? So the energetic flip works both ways. So she's surrounded by the animals. She befriends them. She adores them. She feeds them. She looks after them. She listens to them. She sings while she's working. Even when her sisters are horrid to her and they steal her dress, because it was actually the father who bought the ball dress for Cinderella. She was supposed to go to the ball. She was supposed to have the dress, and one of the ugly sisters steals it from her, beats her, and then condemns her back to the basement and locks her in and stops her from going to the ball, right? But nevertheless, we see her helping the sisters to get ready for the ball. We see her curling their hair, embroidering for them. So I don't want you to misunderstand that part of the story, because that could look like pandering to people who bully you, which obviously is not the lesson that we want to take from this. The lesson we want to take from this, as far as the 4 quadrants, is that she is practicing living in a higher vibration, even though she's seemingly in a lack valley, right? That is the thing that gives her the leverage to be a vibrational match for the higher timeline. The fact that she lives as though she's on a higher timeline, in other words, she embodies happiness, she embodies connection, she embodies love with all of her animal friends, she embodies love in the way she lovingly gets the sisters' dresses embroidered, even though they're trying to banish her. Her essential good nature, her essential open heart makes her a match for the upgrade, because she is rich of heart. She is rich of character. Okay? So she knows how to leverage out of the lack valley. Okay? So she's got that part of the quadrant down. Now then, we mentioned at the beginning of this class that sometimes the universe gives us something which looks like a crisis, which acts as an opportunity. Okay, so we talked about COVID, for example. So what is the crisis that happens in Cinderella's life is that maybe before the invitation came to go to the ball, maybe she could just about handle the drudgery and the misery of her everyday life, as long as she had her animal friends, as long as she sang in the morning and remembered to keep herself in a high frequency. She could kind of cope with the fact that she was relatively living a pretty miserable, mundane life, right? But the invitation to go to the ball represented a golden invitation from the universe to up level, right? So when that invitation was extended to her and then rudely taken away from her by the sisters, who were afraid for her to go to the ball because they were afraid that her beauty, her charm, her magnetism would be somehow competition for them, and they tried to deprive her of the up level, that represented a crisis. It was at that moment that she fell to her knees, crying, weeping. That was a pivotal moment for her, where the weight of the loss of the opportunity cracked her open. Okay? So sometimes the universe has to bring us to our knees. And to quote Rumi, I love the Rumi quote where he says, "When life brings you to your knees, it's the perfect time to pray." Okay? So life brings Cinderella to her knees at that point, right? She's in despair at that point. She's like, this was my one opportunity to get out this fucking basement and be seen and to celebrate and to experience love and to be dressed in a beautiful, luxurious ball gown. Like, she could see herself on the higher timeline. Now, often when we are brought to our knees in despair, when we weep, as she wept at that point, we simultaneously emotionally disarm her. So most of the time when we strongly desire something, we also put protection around our heart because we desire it so much that it almost feels painful to connect with that much desire. So like a valve, a protection valve kicks in and we just tell ourselves, I don't need that thing. It's fine. It's fine. I don't need to go to the party. It's fine. I'll just stay here and sweep. You know, we try to protect ourselves from the things that we desire. But to cut off from the desire is not how we maintain the manifestation sequence. How we maintain it is we really feel the desire. So when she was crying, she was feeling the desire. The tears that came opened her heart, and poof, the fairy godmother appeared, right? The fairy godmother appeared because Cinderella was calling in support from the spirit realm. So the fairy godmother represents the spirit guides that come to all of us when we have a strong desire that we are already calibrated to, and we can envisage ourselves on the higher timeline. So in the Cinderella story, she frequently is depicted as dreaming of going to the ball. She goes to bed at night, she sees herself at the ball, she feels herself dancing, she feels herself swirling around, she can hear the music. Meaning she has already energetically calibrated to being there. So as Melanie said on the cash program, we go first and the quantum field or the universe harmonizes around our desires. So because Cinderella desired to go to the ball so strongly, she could see herself and feel herself there, she's already calibrated to being there. That means that she can receive the support from the spirit guides because they take their cue from us. If we just wait passively for them to come, they don't. We have to call them in, and we have to take action towards the things that we desire. And we have to begin to feel them as if they're already part of our experience to call them in, right? So the fairy godmother appears to Cinderella because she has the eyes to see her, because she's connected to the spirit world, okay? And the godmother makes it possible for her to go to the ball by providing the necessary finery, the fine clothing. However, as with all things, there is a condition, because there is always an energetic flip side. Thank you, Ingrida. There is always an energetic flip side. So the fairy godmother says, you can go to the ball. I'm going to turn the pumpkin into a carriage. I'm going to turn the 3 blind mice into the horses to draw the carriage. I'm going to magically conjure up a ball dress for you. I'm going to wave my magic wand and make all of those things happen. And the condition is that at midnight, if you don't leave the ball by midnight, you're going to turn back into wearing rags again. So can you guess? Hit me up in the comments if you can guess. What is the energetic flip side that Cinderella is being initiated into holding by this condition? The up level, by being given all of this finery to go to the ball, is that she gets to be seen. And at a spirit level, at a soul level, we are all longing to be seen. We are all longing to be admired. We are all longing to dance in the magic of the quantum field. Like, that is something we all desire. So what's the opposite of being elevated into being seen and being admired? Is being seen and being humiliated. So if she's surrounded by women in all their finery, and at midnight she's running the risk of being exposed in her rags, the energetic flip side that she agrees to hold, exactly, Lindsay, the energetic flip side that she's willing to hold is shame, embarrassment, and humiliation. She could have said no, but she didn't. She said yes. She could hold the flip side. So because she could hold the flip side, fairy godmother made it happen for her. You see how it works? She had the desire to go to the ball. She could see herself at the ball. She could see herself on the higher timeline. She had the gratitude. She had the ability to navigate the lack valleys with a higher vibration. She had her own toolkit to keep herself in a higher vibration even when she was in the relative lack valley. There was no part of Cinderella that questioned whether she was worthy to go to the ball. We don't see anything in that story where Cinderella is questioning whether she's worthy to go. She fucking knows she is. She's just got these ugly sisters who are acting as the gatekeepers between herself and the quantum field. So her soul work is to navigate herself beyond the barrier of the ugly sisters, right? So you can look at the 2 ugly sisters, thank you, Lindsay. You can look at the 2 ugly sisters as a metaphor for the voices in your own head telling you, you don't get to do that. You don't get to be seen like that. You don't get to use your voice. You don't get to be that wealthy. You don't get to stand above the crowd. Yeah. Oh, hell no. You get yourself back down to that basement, girl. You bet your ass that those 2 ugly sisters are living inside your head. So part of the homework for this module is to begin to dialogue with the ugly sisters in your own head. What are they telling you that you can't do? What are they telling you that you're not worthy of? And how are you going to navigate past them? Do you remember that? Do you remember the Gladiators back in the day, that TV show? And there was that one task where they had that giant cotton wool bud and they had to like batter the gladiator with it and then get past them. So it's a bit like that with the ugly sisters. You've kind of got to find a way past them, Otherwise, they will always condemn you to the lower timeline. Okay. So back to Cinderella. She's willing to face the humiliation. That is a ritual that she is willing to face. And it happens, right? So she has to leave the ball. And she runs back home, having had an extraordinary night. Now, what we see with the ugly sisters, and this is a really important part of this module, Cinderella provides the energetic counterpoint to the way the ugly sisters try to manipulate the quantum field, okay? Because when we were kids, we had to manipulate our parents to let us do the things we wanted to do, right? So we learned to do that from a very, very young age, to manipulate. And as we said on the Oliver Twist program, what we often try to do is we try to apply the same logic to the quantum field, right? We try to work out ways we can manipulate it to get the outcome we want. Quantum field doesn't work like that. Quantum field is not open for manipulation. It doesn't do bargaining, and it doesn't do manipulation. It just does, are you a vibrational match or are you not a vibrational match? And in that sense, it's actually very simple. So the sisters are constantly, yeah, your kids do it with you. Of course they do. Of course they do. They learn at a very young age how to do it. The ugly sisters are constantly trying to manipulate the odds of success in the quantum field. So remember, the main objective in Cinderella, in the story, is that everybody wants to quote unquote land the prince. Okay, landing the prince represents the ultimate prize, the ultimate success of playing in the quantum field, right? He represents the prize and the success of that. So the sisters try to minimize the competition by banishing Cinderella, who is clearly the most beautiful of them all, to the cellar, right? They also try to manipulate it when the prince comes to the house the following day, because if you recall, he goes knocking on all the doors with the glass slipper to try to find Cinderella. The sisters try to pretend that the shoe belongs to them, right? And they try to squeeze their big trotters into that little glass slipper, and it ain't happening. So throughout the film, they are manipulating the odds. They are manipulating the odds to get the outcome they want, and it doesn't work. Whereas Cinderella spends the whole night dancing away with a handsome young man with blue eyes, who she had no idea was in fact the prince. So this is the irony, right? Every other woman at the ball knew exactly who the prince was. They all had eyes on him, and they were all strategizing and manipulating the situation to try and get his attention. But Cinderella, when she dreamt of going to the ball, was not focused specifically on the prince. She was focused on the whole deal. She wanted the beautiful dress. She wanted to wear the glass slippers. She wanted to look stunning. She wanted to walk the red carpet of her life. You know, she wanted to be seen. She wanted to dance. She wanted to get lost in time. The fact that she doesn't realize when it's midnight is because she's lost track of time. What does losing track of time represent? It represents complete union with the present moment. When we are completely unified in the present moment, there is no manipulation. Manipulation only works when we're plotting and ploying what we can do in order to get the outcome that we want in the future. Does that make sense? So one of the key messages in Cinderella is that the success comes from her ability to surrender to the moment and to be enveloped by it, to be romanced by life itself. So the prince comes looking for her the next day. He goes knocking on every door trying to find her with this glass slipper. The sisters try to force their foot into it unsuccessfully. And eventually, when he's knocked on every door and he's tried everybody else, and he catches a glimpse of Cinderella going up the stairs and calls her, and she turns to look at him, and he looks her in the eye, and he realizes that that's her Okay, Lindsay. And he realizes that that's her. Then they are reunited. The glass slipper represents truth. The glass slipper represents transparency. That when you are transparently yourself, when you are transparent with your gifts, your beauty, when you are present, when you are using the manifestation sequence skillfully, your essential nature cannot not be seen, right? So the prince coming to find her in order to claim and elevate her represents your own divine masculine. Sorry, we had a little bit of a blip there. Are you still with me? Just let me know you're still there. The prince represents the reclamation of the divine masculine part of ourself, recognizing the gifts of the divine feminine within us, right? So the ultimate hero's journey is you are the prince and Cinderella. You are both. The prince is the one who represents claiming your own gifts, claiming your own beauty, claiming your right to be seen and to shine, and giving the divine feminine gifts that you've been blessed with permission to be seen in the world and to be cherished, right? So those are the codes in the Cinderella story. So your homework, which I will share with you very shortly in the group, is to look at what were the things in childhood that you were told were wrong about yourself or were not welcome, what qualities were condemned in you. And can you now start to list those qualities, and can you now start to see the magic in them or the potential divinity in those qualities and how you can harness them? Secondly, which aspects of yourself are you still condemning to the metaphorical basement? And what energy work do you need to do to allow yourself to be seen in your power, in your gifts? To what extent are the ugly sisters playing a role by creating a barrier between yourself and your soul purpose? How can you start to work with the ugly sisters to dismantle those voices in your head? And where are you struggling with the 4 quadrants? Because of the gratitude part, the desire part, the ability to hold the flip side, and the worthiness part of those 4 parts, there will definitely be at least 1, 2, 3, or even possibly all 4 where you tend to get stuck. So just start to reflect on that as well. Which of the 4 quadrants requires the most attention and the most energy work? So it's 11:11, which is a good time to finish. Thank you so much, Lindsay, Lindy, Melinda. I think you've just come on, but you'll catch this on the replay now. And everyone else who was here with me live, I will definitely get back to your comments as soon as I can. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you on Sunday for the Sacred Prostitutes. And once again, if you found this powerful, if you found things in here that you were like, oh my God, that's gold, invite other women into the group. Let them experience it too. It's good for me. It's good for you. It's good for them. So we will uphold the energetics of the higher level of service that we talked about at the beginning of this transmission. That when we are in service in a way that honors for me, for you, for them, it's the Holy Trinity. It's aligned. It becomes sacred. So feel free to bring anyone in. And I really, really look forward to your reflections later on when you get round to doing the homework. Loads of love. Have an amazing day. And thank you so much for sharing the space with me. I'm really enjoying myself. Aho.